In the liminal spaces between heaven and earth, between wisdom and ignorance, between the sacred and profane, there have always been those who cross boundaries. The ancient world knew them well. Figures of twilight and dawn, bearers of dreams and awakeners of souls. The divine messengers, the eternal mediators, who have appeared again and again across cultures, epochs, aeons, movements, eras, religions, wearing different masks, but carrying the same eternal flame of wisdom. Our journey begins with four interconnected figures who changed everything in the esoteric world. Thoth, the ibis-headed Egyptian god of wisdom and writing; Hermes, the swift-footed Greek messenger of the gods; Mercurius, the Roman deity of commerce and communication; and their miraculous synthesis in the figure of Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice greatest sage who would captivate minds from late antiquity through the Renaissance and into our own time. They are not historical curiosities, anthropological artifacts, and represent the human recognition that consciousness requires mediation, that wisdom demands translation, that the gap between the infinite and the finite must somehow be connected. As the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus would later proclaim, "That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, for the performing of the miracles of the one thing." Consider how these figures manifest across cultures. Thoth weighs the hearts of the dead against the feather of Ma'at, truth itself, while recording the judgment in his eternal scrolls. Hermes guides souls through the underworld, while delivering Zeus's messages to mortals. Mercurius presides over boundaries and crossroads, commerce and communication. And Hermes Trismegistus reveals the secret correspondences between microcosm and macrocosm, teaching that true wisdom lies in understanding the hidden connections between all things. What draws us to these figures? Why do they still feel so relevant, so necessary in a way? Perhaps it is because we still inhabit the spaces between our mundane and spiritual lives, between our ignorance and our infinite dreams, between who we are and who we might become, between light and darkness, between anima and animus, between day and night, between sun and moon, between war and peace, between love and hate. We still need guides for these liminal territories, these twilight realms, where transformation becomes possible. The pattern repeats across cultures precisely because it reflects something fundamental about human consciousness and its relationship to the divine. In the Vedic tradition, we find Mercury as Buddha, the enlightened teacher. In Chinese alchemy, quicksilver becomes a symbol of transformation and immortality. Native American traditions speak of divine messengers who bridge the worlds of spirit and matter. The Islamic world preserved and expanded upon Hermetic wisdom through figures like Jabir ibn Hayyan, who saw in Mercury both a material substance and a spiritual principle. But dear friend, we must remember that these figures live as archetypes in our consciousness, and they change us. They remind us that all great wisdom requires translation, from the infinite to the finite, from the divine to the human, from the unconscious to the conscious mind, and vice versa. They teach us that true knowledge is not accumulation of facts, but complete transformation of being and integration of the diversity after recognizing the unity. This is why Jung would later recognize in Mercurius a symbol of both the transformative process itself and its ultimate goal, the unity of opposites, the reconciliation of spirit and matter, the achievement of wholeness. As he writes in Psychology and Alchemy, the mercurial serpent is not only a deadly poison, but also the universal medicine. Our journey through these intermixed traditions will reveal historical facts, but more importantly, eternal truths about consciousness, enlightenment, and the true human quest for wisdom, the Promethean fire, the hero's journey. For in studying these divine messengers, we study ourselves, our own suitability for transformation, our own need for mediation between the worlds, our own potential for awakening to higher consciousness. Let us begin then, not as honest and mature seekers, following these eternal guides through the twilight realms of wisdom, where the boundaries between heaven and earth, between knowledge and transformation, become wonderfully fluid. For as these traditions teach us, the true messenger is the one who facilitates transformation, from ignorance to wisdom, from fragmentation to wholeness, from the mundane to the divine. Mercurius is the arcane substance, and you are about to find the Philosopher's Stone. Only if you are ready. While you think about that, I want you to understand what we're really doing here at Irrevelato. Here, we reveal the lives and stories of the greatest luminaries. We point Prometheus' torch at the old texts that stood the test of time and aged like a good red wine to see what truths have been forgotten. Because the greatest truths, the most relevant truths, the most necessary truths, the most enlightening truths often tend to get banned, burned, hidden, controlled, omitted, falsified. This is the state of history, a mess but a beautiful one. And we will excavate as many truths as possible. Here at Irrevelato, we unveil the secrets you deserve to know. What you're about to experience has been assembled over millennia. Not my own merit, of course, but of all wonderful figures you'll learn about and never forget. But every myth we'll explore, every divine figure we'll encounter, every transformation we'll witness. They're all different maps of the same territory, the architecture of consciousness. Remember this. Never forget this. This is the greatest religious advice you can ever receive. I've laid out timestamps in the description below, so you can jump right to what you are interested in. But I suggest you stay for the entire revelation. But remember, these myths may look like separate stories, but in reality they are interconnected, different chambers in the palace of mind and wisdom. Each one lights up the others in ways that will take your breath away if you want to hear. And for those who want to go deeper, to support this mission of illumination, you'll find links below to join our inner circle through YouTube membership, Patreon, or Ko-Fi. Every contribution helps us create more of these videos. If you are new, welcome. If you know who I am, you also know how close I keep you to my heart. Thank you for being here. Now let's start. Thoth awaits us. O Thoth, who vindicated Osiris against his enemies, vindicate me before the great gods. O you who brought truth to Ra, bring truth to my mind and words to my lips. O you who count the stars and measure the earth, who reckons time and balances all things, who gave speech to silence and light to darkness. Master of the sacred writings, keeper of divine records, you who writes with truth and abhors falsehood, your reed pen defends the Lord of all. You make the weak strong and the wronged vindicated. You who illuminates what is hidden in darkness, who teaches what has not been known, who calculates the years and numbers the months, Lord of wisdom, bearer of the measuring cord, originator of language, author of books, voice of Ra, counselor of Horus, you who makes the gods' words endure, turn your face toward me in kindness, that I may perceive your beauty and walk in your ways. Let knowledge enter my body like the flood waters. Let understanding flow through me like the Nile. Come to me, Thoth, O noble Ibis, O God who longs for Kemenu, O letter writer of the Ennead, great one of Unu. Come to me so that you may guide me and teach me about your ways. These are just a few invocations of Thoth, our first divine messenger, found in the sacred records of ancient Egypt. At Hermopolis, Thoth's priests engaged in what we might now call consciousness research. They studied dreams, developed techniques for inducing altered states, and explored the relationship between symbols and psyche. The temple complex included what they called the House of Life, Per Ankh in Egyptian, where scribes copied texts and practitioners developed new spiritual technologies. Yes, technologies. They understood that consciousness can be systematically explored and transformed through specific practices. One surviving temple text describes the initiation of a priest of Thoth. He who enters here must be pure 4 times. His heart must be full of truth and empty of darkness. His tongue must be skilled in power words, his body marked with sacred signs. This is a practical guide to consciousness transformation, purification, truth-seeking, mastery of language, integration of symbol and flesh. When Greek scholars first encountered these Egyptian temple practices, they were enlightened by Thoth's methodology, his practical techniques for expanding consciousness and accessing divine wisdom. This was a science of transformation. As we'll see when we explore Hermes, the Greeks would take these Egyptian seeds, and grow them into something new, yet recognizably connected to these ancient roots. The pyramid texts, humanity's oldest religious writings, speak of Thoth with the highest reverence. O Thoth, who vindicated Osiris against his enemies, vindicate this king against his enemies. These words, carved into stone around 2400 BCE, mark the beginning of our documented relationship with these eternal mediators. But the story, as we shall see, reaches far deeper into the mists of pre-dynastic Egypt. The ancient Egyptians saw Thoth everywhere, in the moon cycles, in the sacred ibis that stalked the Nile's banks, in the careful measurements of time and space that ordered their world. But who was Thoth truly? His Egyptian name, Jehuti, carries connections to measuring, counting, and calculating, yet these mundane descriptions barely scratch the surface of his profound significance. In Egyptian thought, he was far more than a scribe and record keeper. The coffin texts reveal him as the one who reckons the heavens, counts the stars, and measures the earth. Thoth was a cosmic accountant who balanced mundane ledgers and the forces of reality. Consider the profound implications of Thoth's role in the weighing of the heart ceremony. In the Hall of Ma'at, each soul faced their ultimate moment of truth. The heart, seat of the soul and mind in Egyptian thought, would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, truth, justice, cosmic order itself. And there stood Thoth, recording the verdict that would determine eternal fate. Yet he actively interceded on behalf of the worthy, serving as humanity's advocate before the divine tribunal. This introduces a crucial aspect of all our divine messengers. They stand with one foot in each world, helping us while maintaining cosmic order. But Thoth's role in the cosmic cycle reaches even deeper. Every night, as Ra's solar bark navigates the perilous waters of the underworld, who stands at its prow? Thoth. With his wisdom, he helps Ra overcome Apophis, the serpent of chaos who would devour the sun. Think about this image. The divine scribe, armed not with weapons but with words of power, helping to ensure the sun rises each morning. Magic and wisdom defeating chaos. Knowledge preserving existence itself. Sound familiar? It should. Every time you use language to bring order to chaos, to illuminate darkness, you're reiterating the same eternal pattern. The symbolism runs deeper still. Why an ibis? The ancient Egyptians observed how these sacred birds would stalk the muddy banks of the Nile, using their long curved beaks to pierce beneath the surface, extracting things hidden in the depths. What better symbol for wisdom that penetrates appearances to find hidden truth? And just as the ibis separates valuable food from worthless mud, Thoth helps us distinguish truth from falsehood, wisdom from knowledge. According to Theodore Hopfner, Thoth's Egyptian name, written as Dchi-Utai, originated from DAW, presumably the first known name for the ibis. The conclusion to this interpretation was that Thoth's name means he who is like the ibis. And indeed, Thoth is the ibis-headed god whose wisdom would shake entire millennia. The temples of Thoth, particularly at Hermopolis, named for his later Greek incarnation, were centers not just of worship, but of learning. Priests studied mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and what we would now call chemistry. The ancient Egyptians understood something profound, that the divine messenger doesn't only deliver wisdom, but teaches us how to think. The sacred scrolls speak of Thoth as Lord of Time, master of measurement and calculation, but also as Lord of Wisdom, who grants understanding of divine mysteries. And the greatest understanding is to have the ability to understand on your own. To dare to know. Sapere aude, as Kant would say, is the motto of the Enlightenment. But I diverged. In the Book of the Dead, we find this extraordinary declaration. I am Thoth, the perfect scribe whose hands are pure, who opposes all evil, who writes what is true, who detests falsehood, whose book has brought preservation to all things written therein. Here we see wisdom personified as a proactive force in the world, preserving, protecting, distinguishing truth from falsehood. This is no dusty librarian deity. Thoth is the force of cosmic order and transformation. The later Book of Thoth, though compiled during the Ptolemaic period, captures the essence of what made this figure so compelling to ancient minds. The one who knows the Book of Thoth shall experience two lives in two worlds. These tantalizing words have haunted seekers for millennia, and no wonder. Because this was, according to Egyptian tradition, the book that contained the secrets of immortality itself. Not physical immortality, something far more profound. This exciting suggestion of transformation through knowledge would become a recurring theme, reaching its apotheosis in the later Hermetic traditions. But what does it mean to know the Book of Thoth? The text itself suggests this is not just intellect, it's not just reason, not just nous, not just logos. It is a total and more wholesome integration and transformation of consciousness. But what exactly was in this mysterious Book of Thoth? The fragments that survive speak of spells for enchanting heaven and earth, mountains and seas, and formulae for understanding the languages of birds and the depths of the waters. Yet these should not be taken literally. The true magic lies in their metaphorical significance. Birds represent thoughts that soar above mundane reality. The depths of waters symbolize the unconscious mind. To understand their language is to achieve a higher state of consciousness. A Ptolemaic-era papyrus tells us, "The one who reads the Book of Thoth disturbs the circles of heaven and knows what will be." Again, not literal fortune-telling, but something more profound. The ability to perceive patterns, to understand consequences, to see how the past flows into the future. Isn't this what we're really doing when we study history and myth? We're reading the Book of Thoth, learning to see patterns that transcend time. The sophistication of Thoth's role in Egyptian cosmology becomes even more apparent when we examine the concept of Heka, usually translated simply as magic, but encompassing something far more profound. For the Egyptians, Heka was the primal creative force through which the universe itself came into being. And who was its master? Thoth himself. The coffin texts tell us that all magic is in the heart of Thoth, suggesting that divine wisdom and creative power are inseparable. I don't know about you, but this does not surprise me. In the beginning was the Word. The guy who creates the myths controls the realities. Do you understand? This connection between wisdom and creative force would have far-reaching implications. Remember, in Egyptian thought, the scribe was not merely recording information, but participating in the ongoing creation and maintenance of cosmic order. Think of memory and the broader psyche. It doesn't matter what you remember or know if you don't create, if you don't cast your own peculiar spells. You get it? The lunar aspect of Thoth reveals another fascinating dimension. Unlike the constant burning presence of Ra, Thoth's light waxes and wanes, dies and is reborn. The moon reflects the sun's light indirectly, just as human wisdom reflects divine truth. We catch glimpses, experience moments of illumination, then must work to retain and understand them. "I am Thoth," says one temple inscription, "who counts the stars, who numbers the earth, who measures the in-between places." Notice that, the in-between places, not just light or darkness, but twilight. Not just knowledge or ignorance, but the process of learning. This is where wisdom operates. When Thoth writes in his celestial scrolls, he's documenting reality and helping to shape it. Writing is magic, a world-shaping act that would influence traditions from the Jewish Torah as a blueprint of creation to the medieval grimoires with their carefully crafted sigils and formulas. Writing is the most important magic wand. Crystal ball, sigil, incantation, hypnosis, Jedi mind tricks. Writing is all of it, the beginning and the end, the alpha and omega. And AI developers know that now very well. Magicians waited patiently behind the curtains for too long. Not any more. The Egyptians believed that Thoth had given humanity writing as a tool for self-enlightenment. A famous text declares, "Writing is the tongue of Thoth, and the papyrus roll is his dwelling place." Consider the profundity of this metaphor. Wisdom has a tongue, speaks to us through written symbols, and dwells in the very medium of transmission. This suggests that the act of reading sacred texts is itself a form of communion with divine intelligence. But Thoth's wisdom extended far beyond the shores of writing. The medical papyri attribute their healing knowledge to him. The astronomical texts claim he established the patterns of the stars. The mathematical treatises say he invented numbers and geometry. Even music was his domain. The Greeks would later remember this when they attributed the invention of the lyre to Hermes. In every case, we see wisdom manifesting as a practical toolbox for bending reality to the will of the possessor. You see? Perhaps most intriguingly, Thoth was associated with the Djed pillar, symbol of stability and integration. This connects him to the concept of psychological and spiritual wholeness that would later become so central to Hermetic thought. The Djed pillar represents the spine of Osiris. Therefore, must divine wisdom be embodied, integrated into ourselves? Should we accept the wisdom that transforms our entire way of being in the world? The Egyptian priests understood Thoth's wisdom as operating on multiple levels simultaneously. Some ancient multi-threading, shall we say. On the cosmic level, he maintained the balance of forces that kept the universe in order. The hierarchies and law needed stability. The wheels needed to move tirelessly. On the social level, Thoth provided the tools, writing, mathematics, astronomy, that made civilization possible. On the individual level, Thoth offered guidance for the soul's journey through life and death. And on the magical level, he taught us how to align with the cosmic purpose. This multi-layered corpus of work, myth and wisdom would prove incredibly influential. When later traditions speak of as above, so below, they're building on Thoth's wisdom. True wisdom operates simultaneously at all levels of reality. The Hermeticists would later call this the doctrine of correspondences, but its roots lie in the Egyptian understanding of Thoth as a force that connects and integrates all levels of being. What makes Thoth particularly fascinating is how he transcends our modern categories. He is simultaneously scientist and magician, scribe and creator, judge and advocate, teacher and transformer. When Alexander entered Egypt in 332 BCE, he found Thoth's temples still pulsing with ancient power. The Greeks, with their philosophical minds, would recognize in this ibis-headed god something both foreign and strangely familiar. Their own Hermes, swift messenger, guide of souls, master of words, seemed to resemble this Egyptian sage. But what happened next would transform both traditions forever. The multifaceted nature we talked about would prove crucial in his later synthesis with Hermes and Mercurius. But already in ancient Egypt, we see the pattern that would repeat throughout history. The divine messenger as a figure who transcends dualities, who bridges opposing forces and makes new creation possible. Swift-footed son of Zeus and Maya, guide of souls and herald of the gods, hear my prayer. You who wields the golden staff, who travels between worlds, who brings dreams in the darkness and guides us through twilight realms. Bearer of wisdom, master of words, patron of travelers and crossroads, reveal your secrets. You who opens the ways, who teaches the mysteries, who leads souls through the deepest night, be present now. So begins the Homeric hymn to Hermes, one of our earliest and most complete invocations of this fascinating figure. But this is more than just beautiful poetry. Listen carefully to what the ancient Greeks are telling us through these words. Every epithet reveals another dimension of divine mediation, another way that consciousness bridges the gaps between worlds. At first glance, Hermes might seem worlds apart from the steady ibis-headed Thoth we just explored. Where Thoth brings cosmic order, Hermes delights in playful disruption. Where Thoth weighs and measures, Hermes dances and steals. The Homeric hymn tells us that on the very day he was born, Hermes invented the lyre, stole Apollo's cattle, and cleverly talked his way out of punishment. What kind of divine messenger is this? He's a menace, but look deeper. The hymn continues. Before he crossed his mother's threshold, he found a tortoise's shell, and from it crafted a glorious song. This is a metaphor for how divine wisdom operates. The tortoise, slow and earthbound, becomes an instrument of heavenly harmony. The mundane transforms into the magical. Isn't this precisely what a messenger between worlds must do? Take the raw material of earthly experience and transform it into something that sings with divine truth. The Greeks understood something profound here. The Orphic hymns call Hermes the seed of much remembering Zeus, suggesting that divine wisdom must be both generative and memorious. but they also name him keen and crafty, the guide of souls through unseen realms. Notice the paradox. The same God who tricks and deceives also guides us truly, because sometimes, as every great teacher knows, wisdom must come disguised. Sometimes the straight path isn't the best one to truth. Consider what happens in Plato's Timaeus when they speak of the world soul, a divine force that mediates between the realm of perfect forms and the material world. Doesn't this sound familiar? The Greeks recognized that consciousness itself requires a messenger, a translator between the infinite and the finite. And who better than Hermes, master of boundaries and crossroads? Speaking of crossroads, they were sacred to Hermes. At every Greek crossroads stood a herm, a pillar topped with the god's head, often pointing in multiple directions. But why? Because true wisdom isn't a straight line. It's about choices, possibilities, different paths to understanding. The Greeks would leave offerings at these herms for multiple reasons, such as safe travel and guidance in life's decisions. Think about that. Wisdom personified as a presence at every important junction in life. The caduceus that Hermes carries tells its own profound story. Two serpents intertwined around a central staff, topped with wings. In Apollo's hands, a similar rod heals bodies, but in Hermes' hands it guides souls. The rod represents the axis mundi, the world axis that connects different levels of reality. The serpents, they represent the opposing forces that wisdom must reconcile. And the wings speak of transcendence, the ability to rise above duality into higher understanding. But perhaps most fascinating is Hermes' role as psychopomp, guide of souls through the underworld. The Greeks tell us he could freely enter and exit Hades, leading souls both down into death and up into life. This is psychology centuries before psychology existed. Because psychology is the science of soul, as psyche means soul, it seems knowing Greek helps after all. Because what is soul and wisdom of the soul if not the ability to navigate between consciousness and unconsciousness, between the surface mind and the depths? And dear friend, there are many layers of depths, both above and below. The Homeric texts tell us Hermes was the only god who could use hypnosis wand, bringing sleep and dreams to mortals. This isn't just some magical accessory. The Greeks understood something profound about the relationship between consciousness and divine wisdom. Dreams, like Hermes himself, cross boundaries, between waking and sleeping, known and unknown, mortal and divine. In the space between states, transformation becomes possible. In a different story, Hermes invented the syrinx, or pan flute. After his reconciliation with Apollo over the stolen cattle, Hermes creates this instrument and trades it for Apollo's golden staff. Music for guidance, art for wisdom. The Greeks are telling us something crucial here about the relationship between creativity and divine knowledge. Remember Thoth? It's the same thing. True wisdom is not knowledge. Francis Bacon was partly right when he said, "Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power only if you create something bigger than yourself with it." It's about making something new from what you know. In the Orphic tradition, Hermes holds an even more profound role. The Orphics called him logos prophorikos, the expressed word as opposed to the interior word logos en diathetos. Think about this distinction. Some wisdom remains internal, intuitive, impossible to express. But Hermes represents wisdom that can be communicated, shared, passed on. He is the force that makes the ineffable effable, that transforms mystical insight into practical knowledge. This connects powerfully to his role in Greek magical traditions. The Greek magical papyri, those fascinating documents from Hellenistic Egypt, are full of invocations to Hermes, but not just as a god of magic. He's invoked as the master of language itself, the one who knows the true names of things. Because to name something in magical thinking is to have power over it. Hermes delivers messages and gives us the power to create meaning. And what about those famous winged sandals? The Greeks called them tapedila. They carried him not just through space, but through different levels of reality. Golden and immortal, Homer calls them, bearing the god over sea and boundless earth with the winds. They represent wisdom's mobility, its ability to transcend boundaries, to find unexpected paths to truth. Sometimes wisdom needs to come swiftly, sometimes circuitously, but it must always be able to reach its destination. Consider also Hermes' connection to commerce and exchange. In the agora, the Greek marketplace, Hermes was patron of merchants and traders. At first glance, this might seem odd. What does commerce have to do with divine wisdom? But the Greeks understood that exchange itself is a form of mediation, a bringing together of different values, different needs, different worlds. Every fair trade is a kind of harmony achieved, a balance struck. Isn't this what wisdom does? Helps us negotiate between different truths, different perspectives. The philosophers took this further. In Plato's Cratylus, Socrates suggests that Hermes' name comes from Herminius, interpreter or translator. Therefore, he says, Hermes has to do with speech, and this name means he who contrived speech. Hermes represents the interpretive faculty itself, the ability to make meaning from experience, to translate between different modes of understanding. This is where we find one of the most fascinating aspects of Hermes, his role in the mystery traditions. At Eleusis, where Greeks gathered to experience sacred mysteries that promised transformation of consciousness, Hermes was called Pompeios, the guide. Think about what this means. In the most profound experiences of religious awakening, it was Hermes who led the way. Not Apollo with his bright clarity, not Athena with her wisdom, but the trickster god who moves between worlds. The mysteries taught something profound about the nature of transformation itself. Happy is he who has seen these things before going beneath the earth, says the Homeric hymn to Demeter. But it was Hermes who guided initiates through the experience, who helped them navigate between ordinary consciousness and mystical awakening. Just as he guided souls through the underworld, he guided consciousness through its own depths. This brings us to one of the most cryptic but revealing epithets of Hermes, Ereunios, the helper. But helper in what way? The term literally means swift flowing, suggesting not just assistance but transformation, movement, change. Unlike other gods who embodied fixed principles, Apollo's light, Ares' war, Aphrodite's love, Hermes represented the principle of transformation itself. He helps us become something new. In Greek art, we often find Hermes depicted at liminal moments, births, deaths, transformations. There's a beautiful vase in the British Museum showing him guiding Persephone back from the underworld. Even the muses paint him. Look at his posture, neither fully in one world or the other, but perfectly balanced between them. This is wisdom personified, not as absolute knowledge, but as the ability to move between different kinds of knowing. The philosophical schools took special interest in this aspect of Hermes. The Stoics saw in him the embodiment of logos, divine reason pervading the universe. The Stoic philosopher Cornutus writes, Hermes is the reason that both sends and receives messages, ascending and descending through all levels of being. It's a profound insight into how consciousness itself operates, moving between intuition and analysis, between unconscious depths and conscious understanding. Even more intriguing is how the Greeks connected Hermes to Kairos, the moment of opportunity, the perfect time for action. Unlike Chronos, linear time, Kairos represents timing, the wisdom to know when to act. Hermes embodies this knowledge, when to speak, when to be silent, when to act, when to wait. Isn't this the essence of practical wisdom? Not just knowing what, but knowing when and how and where. As Greek civilization spread through Alexander's conquests, Hermes would take on new dimensions. In Alexandria, where Greek and Egyptian wisdom began their profound dance, something remarkable would happen. The swift messenger of the Greeks would begin to merge with the ibis-headed scribe of Egypt. Cultural syncretism, a metaphor for how wisdom itself evolves, transforms, finds new expressions. We see this especially in how later Greek thinkers began connecting Hermes to the concept of nous, divine intelligence itself. No longer just a messenger between gods and mortals, he became seen as the very principle of intelligence that allows consciousness to grasp divine truth. The Neoplatonists would develop this idea further, seeing in Hermes the mediating principle that allows the human mind to ascend toward divine understanding. Perhaps most remarkable is how Greek philosophers began to see Hermes as the personification of thought itself. Plato speaks of divine inspiration as hermetic, the process by which human consciousness grasps higher truth. And isn't this precisely what we're looking for in any wisdom tradition? Transformation of consciousness? The Greek magical texts reveal another fascinating dimension. They speak of Hermetic chains, sequences of symbols and correspondences that connect earthly things to divine principles. Each level of reality, they believed, contained signatures of higher truths, if only we knew how to read them. And who better to teach this reading than Hermes, master of signs and symbols? Consider the paradox at the heart of the Greek understanding of Hermes. He is both the most practical and the most mystical of gods. He oversees merchants counting their coins and mystics exploring divine mysteries. They say that magicians don't get along with bean counters. But Hermes was a magician and a bean counter. I guess that's a fair compromise. Hermes guides both travelers on physical roads and souls on spiritual journeys. The Greeks understood that true wisdom must operate on all levels, philosophical heights and practical depths. In the philosophical schools of Athens, they debated the nature of Hermes's famous staff. Some saw it as representing the power of rhetoric, the serpents being opposing arguments brought into harmony. Others saw it as depicting the kundalini of later Eastern traditions, the rising force of consciousness itself. Still others interpreted it as showing the reconciliation of opposites necessary for wisdom. They were all right, because true symbols, like true wisdom, operate on multiple levels simultaneously. One of the most profound Greek insights about Hermes appears in a fragment attributed to Heraclitus. The lord whose oracle is at Delphi neither speaks nor conceals, but gives signs. This perfectly captures the Hermetic mode of teaching. Wisdom is not always clothed with clear statements. Sometimes it requires hints, symbols, indirect approaches, intuitions, divine sparks, madness. Sometimes, like Hermes himself, it must trick us into understanding. This connects to another fascinating epithet of Hermes, Dolios, the tricky one, the anima, the moon. This is a peculiar form of deception. Like a dark night of the soul, you survive enlightened, like the phoenix rising from its own ashes. The Greeks understood that sometimes direct knowledge isn't possible or even desirable. Sometimes wisdom must come through paradox, through puzzle, through play. Sometimes, as in the mysteries, we must be led by unexpected paths to truth. The influence of this Greek understanding of Hermes would prove immense. When Romans encountered him, they would recognize aspects of their own Mercurius. But more importantly, they would inherit this profound Greek insight, that consciousness itself requires mediation, that wisdom is transformation, transmutation, enlightenment, reaching for the unknown and uncomfortable, being finite, reaching for the infinite, being one and many, moving between different levels of source code. As Alexander's empire expanded, bringing Greek thought into contact with Egyptian, Persian, and Indian traditions, Hermes would take on even greater significance. He would become more than a god. He would become a symbol for the shape-shifting power of wisdom. The stage was being set for something remarkable. The emergence of Hermes Trismegistus, the figure who would unite Egyptian depth with Greek philosophical sophistication. The Greeks left us another fascinating puzzle in their depiction of Hermes as eternally young yet ancient in wisdom. Unlike Zeus, with his beard or aged Kronos, Hermes appears as a youth, but one whose eyes hold the knowledge of ages. It speaks to something profound about the nature of wisdom itself. It must remain eternally fresh, eternally capable of new expressions while carrying the depth of ancient understanding. Like Eros, depicted by Plato in the Symposium. One of the most telling aspects of Greek ritual practice was the custom of hermata, piles of stones marking boundaries and crossroads. Each traveler would add a stone when passing. Think about this practice. Wisdom grows through collective contribution. Each generation adds its stone to the pile, marking the path for those who follow. Yet Hermes presides over all of it, embodying both accumulation and innovation. The philosophical mystery schools taught that Hermes possessed what they called the keys of consciousness, the ability to unlock different levels of understanding. He is the arcane substance, the philosopher's stone, the apple, the anima mundi. The mystery schools developed specific practices, breathing techniques, meditation methods, all designed to activate what they called the Hermetic faculty in human consciousness. Some of these practices would later influence both Neoplatonic theurgy and early Christian mysticism. But perhaps the most profound Greek insight about Hermes appears in their understanding of language itself. The term hermeneutics, the art of interpretation, comes directly from his name. The Greeks understood that meaning isn't just about words, but about the space between words, the act of interpretation itself. Hermes presides over this space, this gap between symbol and understanding, between sign and significance. Consider also the Greek concept of hermaphrodite, named for Hermes and Aphrodite. Hermes represents the perfect hermaphrodite, anima and animus, logos and eros and sophia, conscious and unconscious. Beyond its biological meaning, this represented the union of opposites necessary for complete understanding. Wisdom isn't just masculine logos or feminine sophia, but their integration. Here again, Hermes plays the crucial role of mediator, bringing together what appears separate. Hermes is all of them. Is he also the demiurge? What do you think? Write to me in the comments. But moving forward, as Greek civilization entered its Hellenistic phase, something remarkable happened. Philosophers began speaking of a hermetic chain linking heaven and earth, a hierarchy of being through which divine wisdom could descend and human consciousness could ascend. Like Jacob's ladder, each level of reality became seen as a text to be interpreted, a symbol to be understood, a crossing point where Hermes might appear. By the time Alexander reached Egypt, the Greeks had developed such a sophisticated understanding of Hermes that they were perfectly prepared to recognize him in Thoth. The merger wasn't just cultural diplomacy, it was a profound recognition that these two great traditions of wisdom were speaking of the same fundamental reality: the need for consciousness to have a guide, an interpreter, a mediator between different levels of understanding. And this is something Plato was always talking about in different ways. The teacher is a mediator. The demiurge is a mediator. The world soul is a mediator. This is how the stage was set for one of the most remarkable developments in the history of Western esotericism. As Greek philosophical sophistication met Egyptian mystical depth, as rational logos encountered ancient wisdom, something new was about to emerge. The figure of Hermes Trismegistus, thrice greatest Hermes, would soon arise, uniting these traditions into something that would influence everything from medieval alchemy to Renaissance magic to modern psychology. But before we explore that synthesis, we need to understand how Rome received and transformed these Greek insights about Hermes. Because in Mercurius, we'll find another remarkable metamorphosis of the eternal messenger. Father of eloquence, you who are the messenger of Jove and of the gods above and the gods below, grant me your brilliant wit as I pray. Since without you, no exchanges between men can be brought to a successful end, either in peace or in war. It is right that the arts of peace and of war should pay you honor. Apuleius, Metamorphoses, the Golden Ass. As Greek culture flowed into Rome, Hermes donned a new mantle, Mercurius. But the Romans were not satisfied with a simple translation of Hermes. They recognized in him elements of their own divine messenger, but they would also transform him in profound ways. Consider how Ovid, in his Fasti, describes Mercurius. Hermes came to Italy and discovered the peoples living in endless warfare with one another. So he decided to civilize them through commerce and exchange of products rather than by violence. Already we see a shift in emphasis. Mercurius is a civilizing force, a patron of commerce and communication. This connects profoundly to the Roman concept of pax deorum, the peace of the gods. For the Romans, divine order meant social stability. And who better to oversee this than the god of exchange and negotiation? Cicero, in De Natura Deorum, tells us that Mercurius is named from merchandise, because he is the god of merchants and commerce. The Romans knew communication is a form of exchange. Ideas are a currency no less valuable than coins. Think about how this fits with the Roman genius for organization, for building networks of roads and trade routes that united a vast empire. Mercurius was the principle of connection that held the Roman world together. But the Romans also developed a profound philosophy of Mercurius. Apuleius, in his remarkable novel The Golden Ass, has the protagonist invoke Mercurius as the master of transformations and changes. This is the key. Mercurius transforms consciousness. Sounds familiar? The Romans were fascinated with mystery religions, particularly the cult of Isis that Apuleius describes. In these traditions, Mercurius played a crucial role as the guide who leads initiates through the transformative journey. Just as he guided souls through the underworld, he guided consciousness through its own depths. The Romans also expanded on the Greek understanding of Hermes as a trickster figure. They saw in Mercurius a kind of divine wit, a cleverness that could outwit even fate itself. Horace, in his odes, calls him ready and resourceful, able to adapt to any situation. This is practical wisdom at its finest, not just knowledge, but the agility to apply it in any context. However, perhaps the most profound Roman insight about Mercurius appears in their understanding of interpretation itself. The term hermeneutics, the art of interpreting texts, comes from the Greek Hermes. But the Romans took this further. They saw in Mercurius the very principle of meaning-making, the ability to find significance in signs and symbols. This would prove immensely influential in later mystical traditions. The idea that the universe itself is a kind of text, full of hidden meanings waiting to be deciphered, this is a fundamentally Mercurial idea, and it would drive everything from medieval scriptural exegesis to Renaissance emblem books to modern semiotics. But the Romans were practical philosophers, and they found in Mercurius a perfect patron for their commercial endeavors. Merchants would invoke him before setting out on journeys, asking for protection and profit. They would also offer him a share of their earnings upon returning safely, a recognition that all success is in some sense a gift from the gods. This practice speaks to something profound about the nature of exchange itself, goods and services, the circulation of value, whether material or symbolic, and Mercurius oversees this circulation, ensuring that it flows smoothly and fairly. But the Roman Mercurius was also the patron of thieves and swindlers. This might seem paradoxical, but it speaks to a deep truth about communication. Language can clarify or obscure, reveal or conceal. And Mercurius embodies this ambiguity, this potential for both truth and trickery. The Roman satirist Lucian plays with this idea in his dialogue The Lovers of Lies, where Mercurius appears as a shape-shifting trickster who delights in spreading false tales. But even here there's a deeper message. Lucian suggests that lies can sometimes serve truth, that fiction can illuminate reality in ways that plain facts cannot. This is the paradox of Mercurius. He is the god of boundaries, but also of boundary crossing. He is the patron of commerce, but also of thieves. He is the master of language, but also of its limits and ambiguities. As Rome spread its influence across the Mediterranean world, it encountered the wisdom traditions of Egypt, Persia, and beyond. And in these meetings, something remarkable happened. The figure of Mercurius began to merge with other divine messengers, most notably with the Egyptian Thoth. This syncretism was a cultural exchange and a recognition of deep archetypal patterns that transcend any single tradition. The swift-footed messenger, the guide of souls, the master of wisdom, these are universal figures that appear again and again in human myth and religious practice. And so, in the Hellenistic city of Alexandria, a new figure began to emerge. Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice greatest Hermes, a synthesis of Greek philosophical sophistication with Egyptian mystical depth. But before we explore this Hermetic fusion, it's worth pausing to consider what the Roman evolution of Hermes can teach us about the nature of wisdom itself. The Romans understood better than any of us that knowledge is about application, about the ability to overcome anything. They saw in Mercurius a model for this practical wisdom, a cleverness that is both philosophical and street smart, both idealistic and pragmatic. And they understood that this wisdom operates through exchange, through the circulation of ideas, goods and values that make civilization possible. We too need wisdom that is both profound and practical, both visionary and grounded. We too need to find ways to communicate across boundaries, to find common ground amid diversity. And perhaps most importantly, we need to remember that wisdom isn't just about individual enlightenment. It's about collective flourishing, about the exchange of gifts that enriches us all. This is the message of Mercurius, that we are all travelers on a common journey, all participants in a great cosmic commerce. As we turn now to the emergence of Hermes Trismegistus, keep this Roman insight in mind, because in the Hermetic tradition, we'll find a vision of wisdom that is both deeply mystical and eminently practical. A fusion of philosophical rigor and spiritual depth that still has much to teach us today. I, thrice greatest Hermes, write this record for those whose feet walk in the way of wisdom. For though it seems that I speak of things past, in truth I reveal what is, what was, and what shall be. Asclepius 1, the Corpus Hermeticum. At the heart of Alexandria, that great cosmopolitan city of the Hellenistic world, an extraordinary meeting of minds took place. Greek philosophy, with its rigorous logic and systematic inquiry, encountered the profound mysticism and ritual practices of ancient Egypt. And from this encounter, a new figure emerged, Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice greatest Hermes. Who was this enigmatic sage? Historical evidence is scarce, but his influence is undeniable. The Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of texts attributed to him, would forever change esotericists from late antiquity to the Renaissance and beyond. But before we dive into the teachings of the Hermetica, let's consider the historical context that made this synthesis possible. Alexandria was a city like no other, a melting pot of cultures, religions, and ideas. Greek and Egyptian, Jew and Gentile, philosopher and magician, all mingled in its streets and libraries. And it was in this environment that the figure of Hermes Trismegistus took shape. The very name speaks to his syncretic nature. Hermes from the Greek tradition, thrice greatest from the Egyptian epithet applied to Thoth. This was a recognition of a unity underlying these diverse traditions. The Hermetica themselves are a fascinating blend of philosophical dialogue, mystical revelation, and practical instruction. They cover topics ranging from the nature of God, to the structure of the cosmos, to the art of alchemy. But underlying all of these is a central theme, the idea of gnosis, of transformative knowledge that leads to union with the divine. Consider the opening lines of the Corpus Hermeticum in a treatise called Poimandres. Once when thought came to me of the things that are, and my thinking soared high, and my bodily senses were restrained, like someone heavy with sleep from too much eating or toil of the body, an enormous being, completely unbounded in size, seemed to appear to me and call my name and say to me, "What do you want to hear and see? What do you want to learn and know from your understanding?" This is a visionary experience, a direct encounter with a divine figure who offers to reveal the secrets of the universe. And what follows is a cosmological revelation that blends Greek and Egyptian elements into a unique synthesis. According to this revelation, the cosmos emerged from a primordial unity, a divine mind that contained all things in potential. From this mind emerged the Logos, the divine word or reason that gives form and order to the universe. And from the Logos came the Demiurge, the craftsman god who shaped the material world. If this sounds reminiscent of Platonic philosophy, it is, but with a distinctly Egyptian twist. The idea of a divine mind giving birth to the cosmos through the power of the word, this is straight out of Egyptian creation myths, where the god Ptah creates through the power of speech. But the Hermetic teachings go beyond cosmology. They also offer a path of spiritual transformation, a way for the human soul to ascend back to its divine source. Central to this path is the idea of the anthropos, the primal human who contains within itself the seed of divinity. The Poimandres revelation describes this anthropos as a being of light, a direct emanation of the divine mind. But it also describes how this primal human descended into the material world, becoming enmeshed in the realm of matter and forgetting its true nature. The goal of Hermetic practice, then, is to awaken the soul to its divine origin, to strip away the layers of material illusion and remember the truth of our being. And this is where the practical teachings of the Hermetica come into play. One of the most famous of these teachings is the Emerald Tablet, a short text that distills the essence of Hermetic wisdom into a few cryptic lines. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to perform the miracles of the one thing. This is the doctrine of correspondences, the idea that the microcosm, the human, mirrors the macrocosm, the universe. But it's also a practical guide to transformation. By understanding how the principles of the cosmos operate within ourselves, we can learn to align with the divine order and achieve gnosis. The idea of correspondence would prove immensely influential in later esoteric traditions. It underlies everything from astrological medicine to alchemical symbolism to Kabbalistic theories of the Sephirot. But its origins lie in the Hermetic Synthesis of Greek and Egyptian thought. Another key Hermetic teaching is the idea of rebirth or regeneration. The Hermetica speak of a second birth, a spiritual awakening that transforms the soul and aligns it with the divine. This isn't just a metaphor. The texts describe specific practices, from meditation to ritual invocation, designed to catalyze this transformation. Here again, we see the blending of Greek and Egyptian elements. The idea of a spiritual rebirth was central to the Greek mystery cults, particularly the Eleusinian mysteries. But it was also present in Egyptian traditions, particularly in the myth of Osiris, who is dismembered and reborn. The Hermetica take this idea and universalize it, making it a model for the soul's journey of awakening. And they offer practical techniques for achieving this awakening, techniques that would later be taken up by Gnostic and Christian mystics, by Islamic Sufis and Jewish Kabbalists. But perhaps the most profound Hermetic teaching is the idea of the unity of all things. The Hermetica repeatedly stress that the divine is not separate from the world, but immanent within it. God is all that is, the one reality that underlies the multiplicity of appearances. This is a radically monistic vision, one that questions the dualism of matter and spirit, of God and world, and it has profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our place in the cosmos. If the divine is present in all things, then our task is not to escape the world, but to find the sacred within it. And if we ourselves are emanations of the divine mind, then our destiny is deification, the realization of our own inherent divinity. These are heavy ideas, ones that would challenge and inspire spiritual seekers for centuries to come. Knowledge must be lived, that wisdom must be embodied in practice. And so we find, alongside the philosophical dialogues and mystical revelations, practical instructions in everything from alchemy to astrology to theurgy. These are not separate from the spiritual teachings, but extensions of them, ways of working with the principles of the cosmos to effect transformation. It's here that we see the true genius of the Hermetic Synthesis, a fusion of theory and practice, of wisdom and technique. It recognizes that true knowing is intellectual and experiential, a gnosis that transforms the knower. And this is perhaps the greatest gift of Hermes Trismegistus, a model of integral wisdom that unites the philosophical, the mystical, and the practical. It's a wisdom that sees the divine in all things and seeks to awaken the divine within ourselves. As we turn now to the later development of Hermetic ideas in alchemy and Renaissance magic, keep this integral vision in mind, because what we'll find is an elaboration of the Hermetic Synthesis, a continuing attempt to unite heaven and earth, spirit and matter, wisdom and practice. And in this attempt, we may find clues for our own time, for how to walk a world that seems increasingly fragmented and divided, for how to find meaning and purpose in an age of uncertainty. The message of Hermes Trismegistus is that wisdom is always available, always waiting to be discovered anew. It is a message of infinite hope and possibility. And just because I can't find any reasons why I shouldn't also tell you this, here is the English translation of the Emerald Tablet by Isaac Newton. "'Tis true, without lying, certain and most true. That which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below to do the miracle of one only thing. And as all things have been and arose from one by the mediation of one, so all things have their birth from this one thing by adaptation. The sun is its father, the moon its mother. The wind hath carried it in its belly. The earth is its nurse. The father of all perfection in the whole world is here. its force or power is entire if it be converted into earth. Separate thou the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry. It ascends from the earth to the heaven, and again it descends to the earth and receives the force of things superior and inferior. By this means you shall have the glory of the whole world, and thereby all obscurity shall fly from you. Its force is above all force, for it vanquishes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing. So was the world created. From this are and do come admirable adaptations, whereof the means is here in this. Hence I'm called Hermes Trismegistus, having the three parts of the philosophy of the whole world. That which I have said of the operation of the sun is accomplished and ended. O divine art of alchemy, only through you can what God has planted in metals be perfected. Albertus Magnus, de mineralibus. As the wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus flowed into the medieval world, it would take on new forms and find new applications. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the fascinating and often misunderstood tradition of alchemy. The Hermetic Synthesis of Greek philosophical sophistication and Egyptian mystical depth would prove immensely influential in the centuries to come. One of the most fascinating manifestations of this influence can be found in the medieval alchemical traditions that emerged in both the Islamic world and Christian Europe. Today we tend to think of alchemy as a pseudoscience, a misguided attempt to turn lead into gold. But for the medieval alchemists, the transformation of metals was only the outer symbol of a much deeper process, the transformation of the soul itself. The roots of this spiritual alchemy can be traced back to the Hermetic texts themselves. The emerald tablet, that enigmatic distillation of Hermetic wisdom, was often read as an alchemical allegory. Its cryptic lines about the Father of all perfection in the whole world and the force of all forces were seen as references to the Philosopher's Stone, the ultimate goal of the alchemical quest. But what was this stone really? For the medieval alchemists, it was far more than a material substance. It was a symbol of the perfected human being, the anthropos of Hermetic teaching, who had fully realized its divine nature. We see this idea expressed beautifully in the work of Zosimos of Panopolis, one of the earliest alchemical writers. In his treatise on the letter Omega, Zosimos describes a vision in which he sees a priest standing before an altar shaped like a bowl. The priest, he says, is the copper man who is being whitened. At first glance, this may seem like a purely chemical description, but for Zosimos, it is a profound spiritual allegory. The copper man is the unredeemed human being, still trapped in the realm of matter. The process of whitening is the purification of the soul, the stripping away of material dross to reveal the divine essence within. This idea of alchemy as a spiritual discipline would find its fullest expression in the work of the medieval Arabic alchemists. Figures like Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber, would develop a sophisticated symbolic language that mapped the stages of chemical transformation onto the journey of the soul. In Jabir's system, Mercury played a central role. It was seen not just as a physical substance, but as a philosophical principle, the prime matter from which all metals derived. The goal of the alchemist was to liberate the mercury hidden within base metals, to purify it and raise it to its highest state. For Jabir and his followers, the liberation of mercury was a spiritual allegory for the liberation of the soul from the bonds of matter. It was a process of inner transformation, of solving and coagulating, of dissolving the ego and reconstituting it in a higher, purer form. This spiritual understanding of Mercury would flow into the Western alchemical tradition, finding beautiful expression in works like Albertus Magnus's De Mineralibus. Here, Mercury is described as the first matter of the metals, the water that does not wet the hands, the living silver that animates all things. For Albertus, as for his Arabic predecessors, this Mercury was not just a literal substance, but a metaphysical principle. It represented the fluid, changeable, mercurial nature of the soul itself, which must be fixed and perfected through the alchemical process. We find similar ideas in the work of Roger Bacon, another towering figure of medieval alchemy. In his Mirror of Alchemy, Bacon speaks of Mercury as the mother of all metals, which illuminates every body, for it is light condensed in itself. This idea of Mercury as a kind of condensed spiritual light, a reflection of the divine radiance within matter, is a powerful one. It suggests that the goal of alchemy is to reveal the hidden light within all things, including ourselves. Interestingly, we find parallels to this idea in other traditions. In Vedic astrology, for example, Mercury is associated with Buddha, the god of wisdom and intellect. It is seen as the planet that governs mental processes, communication, and spiritual understanding. Similarly, in Chinese alchemy, Mercury is associated with the principle of Shen, or spirit. It is seen as the animating force that gives life and consciousness to all things. The goal of Taoist alchemy is to cultivate and refine this Shen, to merge it with the Tao, the ultimate reality. Even in the indigenous traditions of the Americas, we find Mercury playing a symbolic role. In Mesoamerican mythology, for example, Mercury was associated with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, who was seen as a bringer of wisdom and a mediator between heaven and earth. What all of these traditions suggest is that the alchemical fascination with Mercury reflects a deep intuition about the nature of mind and spirit, about the transformative power latent within you. And this, perhaps, is the real legacy of the medieval alchemists. They saw in the transformations of metals a mirror for the transformations of the soul. They understood that the real philosopher's stone is not a magical substance, but a state of being, a consciousness so refined and perfected that it reflects the divine light in all things. As we move now into the Renaissance, we'll see how this alchemical understanding of Mercury would take on new dimensions. In figures like Paracelsus and Ficino, the alchemical and the philosophical, the scientific and the spiritual, would merge in powerful new ways. But the core insight remains the same. The Mercury of the alchemist is not just a symbol, but a reality, the living, conscious, transformative essence within all things. To know Mercury, to work with it, is to participate in the great work of spiritual transformation. And this, in the end, is the real gold that the alchemists sought. Not the vulgar metal, but the shining, incorruptible essence of the spirit itself. It is a gold that each of us carries within, waiting to be refined and perfected. As we continue our journey through Hermetic wisdom, keep this alchemical Mercury in mind, for it is the thread that connects all of these traditions, the messenger that carries wisdom across cultures and epochs, the living silver that animates the great work of human transformation. As the medieval world gave way to the Renaissance, the Hermetic tradition would undergo a profound transformation. The rediscovery of ancient texts, the influx of Greek scholars from the East, and the invention of the printing press would all contribute to a remarkable efflorescence of Hermetic thought. At the center of this Renaissance Hermeticism was the figure of Marsilio Ficino, the Florentine philosopher and priest who would translate the Corpus Hermeticum into Latin for the first time. For Ficino, Hermes Trismegistus was not just an ancient sage, but a prophet of Christianity, a Gentile prophet who had foreseen the coming of Christ. In his work De Vita Libri Tres, 3 books on life, Ficino develops a remarkable synthesis of Hermetic, Platonic, and Christian ideas. He sees in the Hermetic teaching of the anthropos, the divine human, a prefiguration of the Christian doctrine of the Incarnation. And he sees in the Hermetic path of gnosis, of transformative knowledge, a model for the spiritual life. But Ficino was a philosopher and a magician. Like the ancient theurgists, he believed that the human soul could be tuned to the divine through the use of symbols, rituals, and talismans. And he saw in the Hermetic texts a treasure trove of such magical knowledge. One of the most fascinating aspects of Ficino's magic was his use of astrology. He believed that by understanding the influences of the stars and planets, one could harness their powers for healing and spiritual growth. And in this astrological system, Mercury played a central role. For Ficino, Mercury was the planet of intellect, of communication, of the swift and agile mind. But it was also the planet of magic itself. the celestial power that could bridge the gap between human and divine. In his astrological talismans, Ficino would often invoke Mercury, asking for its guidance and protection. This idea of Mercury as a magical mediator would find its fullest expression in the work of another Renaissance Hermeticist, Giordano Bruno. For Bruno, Mercury was a planet and also a cosmic principle, the soul of the world, the anima mundi. In his work Spazio della Bestia Trionfante, the expulsion of the triumphant beast, Bruno describes Mercury as the messenger of the gods, the interpreter of the divine mind, the mediator between the superior and inferior worlds. He sees in Mercury the key to a new kind of magic, a magic of the mind, of the imagination, of the infinite possibilities of human consciousness. Bruno's vision was a radical one, so radical in fact that it would lead to his execution by the Inquisition. But his ideas would live on, inspiring generations of Hermetic thinkers and practitioners. We see this Hermetic influence in the work of Paracelsus, the Swiss alchemist and physician who revolutionized medicine in the 16th century. For Paracelsus, alchemy was science and spirit, a way of unlocking the hidden powers of nature and the human soul. Central to Paracelsus's system was the idea of the tria prima, the three primes of mercury, sulfur, and salt. Chemical substances and spiritual principles. Mercury represents the mind, sulfur the soul, salt the body. By understanding and balancing these principles, Paracelsus believed one could achieve health, harmony, and spiritual transformation. This idea of the tria prima would be taken up by later alchemists, finding beautiful expression in works like Heinrich Kunradt's Amphitheatrum Sapientiae Aeternae, Amphitheatre of Eternal Wisdom. Here, Mercury is depicted as a serpent-entwined caduceus, a symbol of the awakening of consciousness and the ascent of the soul. In the art and literature of the Renaissance, too, we find Mercury playing a central role. In Botticelli's famous painting Primavera, for example, Mercury is shown dispelling the clouds of winter with his caduceus, heralding the coming of spring and the renewal of life. It's a powerful image of the transformative power of the Hermetic Mercury. And in Shakespeare's plays, we find numerous references to Mercury as a symbol of eloquence, of wit, of the power of language to transform reality. In Hamlet, for example, the prince speaks of that Hermes who was Mercury, herald and messenger of the gods. It's a subtle nod to the enduring power of the Hermetic tradition. But perhaps the most profound expression of Renaissance Hermeticism can be found in the emblem books of the period. These remarkable works, which combined symbolic images with cryptic text, were designed as tools for meditation and spiritual transformation. One of the most famous of these emblem books was Michael Meyer's Atalanta Fugiens, Atalanta Fleeing, published in 1617. Each emblem in the book depicts a stage in the alchemical process, with Mercury playing a central role. In emblem 14, for example, Mercury is shown leaping between the sun and the moon, a symbol of the mediating power of consciousness. Mercury was the guide on the journey of alchemy, the Ariadne's thread that could lead the soul through the labyrinth of matter to the gold of spiritual realization. As we move now into the modern era, we'll see how Mercury would take on new forms, in the depth psychology of Carl Jung, in the poetry of William Butler Yeats, in the esoteric teachings of Rudolf Steiner. But the core message remains the same, that Mercury is the messenger of transformation, the living spirit that awakens us to our own divine potential. And in this message, perhaps we can find a key to the problems we have now. We have decisions to make. In an age of fragmentation and uncertainty, the Hermetic Mercury offers us a path of integration and wholeness. As the Renaissance alchemist Gerhard Dorn wrote, "Transform yourselves from dead stones into living philosophical stones." This is the call of the Hermetic Mercury, a call to awakening, to transformation, to the realization of our own inherent divinity, inviting us ever deeper into the mysteries of consciousness and cosmos. Let us open ourselves to the transformative power of Mercury, the messenger of the gods, the guide of souls. We may just find our way to the true gold, the shining, eternal essence of the spirit itself. As above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. As the Hermetic tradition flowed into the modern era, it would undergo yet another series of transformations. In the hands of depth psychologists, esoteric philosophers, and visionary artists, the ancient wisdom of Hermes would find new expression and new relevance. Perhaps the most influential of these modern Hermeticists was Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who founded the field of analytical psychology. For Jung, the Hermetic tradition was a living stream of wisdom that could reveal more secrets about our psyche. In his work, Psychology and Alchemy, Jung explores the parallels between the alchemical process and the process of individuation, the psychological journey of self-realization. He sees in the alchemist's search for the philosopher's stone a symbolic representation of the search for wholeness, for the integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. And central to this process for Jung is the figure of Mercurius. In alchemical symbolism, Mercurius is the mediator between opposites, between masculine and feminine, between matter and spirit, between the ego and the self. He is the hermaphrodite who contains within himself the seeds of wholeness and transformation. In his later work, Mysterium Conjunctionis, Jung delves even deeper into the symbolism of Mercurius. He sees in this figure a representation of the collective unconscious itself, the deep, shared reservoir of symbols and archetypes that underlies all human experience. For Jung, the goal of psychotherapy was to bring the contents of the unconscious into consciousness, to illuminate the darkness of the psyche with the light of understanding. And in this process, he believed, the Hermetic wisdom could serve as an invaluable guide and ally. Jung's ideas would be taken up and developed by his students and followers, notably Marie-Louise von Franz, who wrote extensively on alchemy and its psychological implications. In her work, Alchemy, an introduction to the symbolism and the psychology, von Franz explores the alchemical process as a model for the transformation of the soul. Like Jung, von Franz sees in Mercurius a key to this transformation. He is the soul guide who leads us through the darknesses of the unconscious, the light bringer who illuminates the hidden gold within. As von Franz writes, in the alchemical opus, the adept saw a picture of his own individuation process. In the darkness of the retort, the divine spark of the anthropos, the shining Mercurius, came alive. This idea of the divine spark within would find powerful expression in the work of another modern Hermeticist, the poet and visionary William Butler Yeats. For Yeats, the Hermetic tradition was a source of profound spiritual insight and creative inspiration. In his book, A Vision, Yeats outlines a complex system of symbolism and cosmology that draws heavily on Hermetic ideas. Central to this system is the figure of the daemon, a kind of higher self or guiding spirit that Yeats associates with the Hermetic Mercury. For Yeats, the goal of spiritual life is to unite with this daemon, to achieve a state of unity of being in which the individual self merges with the universal self. And in this process, he believed, the Hermetic wisdom could serve as a map and a compass. We see this Hermetic influence in Yeats's poetry too, in works like The Second Coming, with its vision of a spiritus mundi or world soul, and Sailing to Byzantium with its quest for the artifice of eternity. For Yeats, as for the alchemists, art was a means of spiritual transformation, a way of turning the lead of everyday experience into the gold of eternal truth. This idea of art as alchemy would find powerful expression in the work of the Surrealists too. For artists like André Breton and Max Ernst, the Hermetic tradition was a source of profound inspiration, a key to unlocking the creative powers of the unconscious mind. In works like Ernst's The Robing of the Bride and Breton's novel Arcanum 17, we find a rich symbolism drawn from Hermetic sources, images of androgyny, of transformation, of the union of opposites. For the Surrealists, as for Jung, the Hermetic Mercury was a guide to the depths of the psyche, a messenger from the realms of dream and imagination. But the Hermetic influence in modern thought goes beyond psychology and art. In the esoteric teachings of Rudolf Steiner and the anthroposophical movement, for example, we find a profound engagement with Hermetic ideas. In his lectures on the Christian mystery, Steiner explores the Hermetic idea of the divine human, the being who has realized his own inherent divinity. And in his occult science, Steiner outlines a cosmology that draws heavily on Hermetic principles, a vision of the universe as a living, evolving organism guided by spiritual intelligences. For Steiner, as for the Hermeticists of old, the cosmos was a great alchemical laboratory, a place of constant transformation and becoming. This idea of the universe as a place of becoming would find scientific expression too in the emerging fields of quantum physics and cosmology. In the work of scientists like David Bohm and Fritjof Capra, we find a vision of reality that sounds like the ancient Hermetic wisdom. For Bohm, the universe was an undivided wholeness, a hollow movement in which everything is interconnected and interpenetrating. And in this hollow movement, Bohm offers a vision of reality strikingly similar to the Hermetic notion of the universe as a living, evolving, interconnected whole. This Hermetic understanding of wholeness and interconnectedness finds further resonance in the work of physicist Fritjof Capra. In his influential book, The Tao of Physics, Capra notes some parallels between modern physics and Eastern mysticism, arguing that both point to a fundamentally interconnected and interdependent reality. Like the Hermeticists, Capra sees the universe as a dynamic web of relationships. Capra's later work, particularly The Web of Life and the Hidden Connections, develops this theme further, exploring how the Hermetic principles of correspondence and living nature are reflected in the emerging scientific understanding of complex systems, from ecosystems to social networks to the human body itself. In the field of neuroscience, too, we find echoes of Hermetic wisdom. The concept of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, has revolutionized our understanding of the mind. This plasticity, this capacity for transformation and adaptation, is remarkably consonant with the alchemical notion of the malleability of consciousness. Moreover, the discovery of mirror neurons, brain cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing that same action, has profound implications for our understanding of empathy, learning, and the deep interconnectedness of human beings. In a sense, mirror neurons are a physical manifestation of the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as within, so without. As we move further into the 21st century, Hermetic ideas continue to find new expressions and applications. For example, the figure of Hermes takes on new relevance as the god of communication, information exchange, and the movement between realms. Who else can be the god of the internet, if not Mercurius? The internet indeed can be seen as a kind of Hermetic tool, a means of connecting the above of the global noosphere with the below of individual minds and computers. The virtual realities and augmented realities made possible by digital technology are, in a sense, modern actualizations of the Hermetic notion of the imagination as a bridge between the mental and the material. Even the blockchain, the decentralized ledger technology underlying cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, seems Hermetic. The blockchain is a kind of digital emerald tablet, a tamper-proof record of transactions and agreements. It's a technology that relies on principles of distributed intelligence, consensus reality, and the alchemical transmutation of data into value. Hermetic ideas find fertile ground in the realm of contemporary spirituality too. The New Age movement, with its emphasis on personal transformation, holistic healing, and the exploration of altered states of consciousness, has deep roots in the Hermetic tradition. Practices like meditation, visualization, and energy work all have their analogues in the repertoire of the Hermetic Magus. The same is true of many forms of contemporary paganism and esoteric spirituality. Wicca, Thelema, chaos magic, and other systems draw heavily on Hermetic principles and practices, often in creative synthesis with other traditions. The figure of Hermes himself, the archetypal magician and initiator, is a key figure in many of these paths. Hermetic ideas also find new applications in business and leadership. The concept of the visionary leader who can navigate change, communicate effectively, and bridge different worlds clearly smells like Hermes. And practices like design thinking, creative problem solving, and the iterative process of prototyping and refinement is the same you would use in the alchemical process of transformation. A central theme emerges: the enduring power of Hermetic wisdom as a tool for understanding and engaging the fundamental mysteries of our world. The Hermetic tradition is a framework for exploring the nature of mind, matter, and the living universe that encompasses them both. At the heart of this framework is the recognition that consciousness is the lead actor in the theatre of creation and transformation. The Hermetic path is ultimately one of awakening to our own co-creative power, our capacity to shape ourselves and our world through the alchemy of awareness, intention, and action. This awakening is collaborative. We're all together in the great work of cosmic evolution, each contributing our own unique insights and energies to the unfolding whole. The Hermetic journey is one of individuation, in service of collective transformation. Our personal growth and healing is intimately interconnected with the healing and evolution of the larger systems in which we are embedded, created, living. Hermetic wisdom is guidance and inspiration. It reminds us that the key to sustainable progress lies in learning to work in harmony with its living intelligence. It reminds us to cultivate a fluid, adaptable, and integrative way of thinking that can bridge differences and find creative solutions. And it reminds us to take responsibility for our own transformation as the foundation for any real change in the world. This is the deeper invitation of Hermes Trismegistus and the lineage of wisdom he represents. An invitation to participate fully and consciously in the great alchemical work of our time. It is an invitation to each of us to become philosophers in the truest sense, lovers of wisdom who seek to understand and embody the living principles of nature. It is an invitation to join in the eternal human quest to know ourselves, to heal our divisions, and to co-create a world that reflects the highest potentials of the human spirit. As we accept this invitation and take up this work, we may find that the ultimate philosopher's stone is not a literal substance, but a state of being, a way of engaging reality with an open, curious, and reverential mind, a way of dancing between order and chaos, permanence and change, mind and matter, self and cosmos. We may find that the true gold of the alchemists is the luminous consciousness that dwells within each of us, waiting to be refined and transmuted into an agent of healing, creativity, and transformation. This is the promise and the challenge of the Hermetic path, to become contemporary alchemists of consciousness, modern magi of matter and mind. It is a path that requires courage, discipline, and a willingness to question our assumptions and stretch beyond our comfort zones. But it is also a path of profound beauty, wonder, and fulfillment. A path that can lead us to a deeper sense of meaning, purpose, and interconnection in a rapidly changing world. As we embrace this path and take up the mantle of the Hermetic tradition in our own unique ways, we can draw strength and inspiration from the examples of those who have gone before us. The long lineage of seekers, sages, and alchemists who have kept the flame of this wisdom burning through the centuries. From Thoth to Hermes, from Marsilio Ficino to Carl Gustav Jung, from Renaissance magi to modern-day visionaries, this lineage reminds us that transformation is always possible, that consciousness is the ultimate frontier, and that the great work of the universe is an ongoing, participatory, and eternally unfolding process. Here at Irrevelato, our mission is to contribute to this great work by exploring, preserving, and sharing the world's wisdom traditions in a spirit of creative synthesis and open-ended inquiry. I believe that the Hermetic tradition, with its emphasis on the unity of mind and matter, self and world, science and spirituality, has a vital role to play in the integral renaissance of our time. Remember the words of Hermes Trismegistus in the Emerald Tablet. That which is above is from that which is below, and that which is below is from that which is above, working the miracles of one thing. May we each find our own way to unite the above and the below, the inner and the outer, the timeless and the timely, in service of the one thing that matters most: the awakening and flourishing of the human spirit in a world that sorely needs our care and creative intervention. In memory of all the great truth-seekers and alchemists through history, in all cultures and epochs, onward, let us give thanks to our ancestors and all the great torchbearers who came before us for their sacrifices and handing down their greatest wealth, their greatest elixir, the shining golden nuggets of wisdom which have survived the greatest erasures and chaos and weathered all tempests, waiting in the secret chambers of our souls, right under our nose all along, to be decrypted and activated by us when we're ready to take our lives and the evolution of humanity into our own hands. So, dear friend, old and new, now that you have come to realize the true nature of Hermes, which has been working through you all along, whether you knew it or not, in every act of communication, every decision, every dream, every synchronicity, I ask you, how will you take the flame of this wisdom into your own heart and out into the world? What kind of alchemist will you choose to become? What will you transform, and what will you let transform you? The hourglass of the age turns. The sands are running thin. The dream of a new renaissance can no longer be postponed. Will you be one to awaken Mercury's gifts in our drowsy limbo world and inject new life, clarity, and electricity? While the answer becomes clear in the silence, I will wait for you, dear friend, at the crossroads where past and future meet, where lead turns into gold, where the many remember they are one. The emerald tablet awaits your signature, and so does history. It starts with you, it starts now. And in that day men will be weary of life, and they will cease to think the universe worthy of reverent wonder and of worship. And so religion, the greatest of all blessings, for there is nothing, nor has been, nor ever shall be, that can be deemed a greater boon, will be threatened with destruction. Men will think it a burden and will come to scorn it. They will no longer love this world around us, this incomparable work of God, this glorious structure which He has built, this sum of good made up of things of many diverse forms, this instrument whereby the will of God operates in that which Be has made, ungrudgingly favoring man's welfare, this combination and accumulation of all the manifold things that can call forth the veneration, praise and love of the beholder. Darkness will be preferred to light, and death will be thought more profitable than life. No one will raise his eyes to heaven. The pious will be deemed insane, and the impious wise. The madman will be thought a brave man, and the wicked will be esteemed as good. As to the soul, and the belief that it is immortal by nature, or may hope to attain to immortality, as I have taught you, all this they will mock at, and will even persuade themselves that it is false. No word of reverence or piety, no utterance worthy of heaven and of the gods of heaven will be heard or believed. And so the gods will depart from mankind, a grievous thing, and only evil angels will remain, who will mingle with men, and drive the poor wretches by main force into all manner of reckless crime, into wars and robberies and frauds, and all things hostile to the nature of the soul. Then will the earth no longer stand unshaken, and the sea will bear no ships. Heaven will not support the stars in their orbits, nor will the stars pursue their constant course in heaven. All voices of the gods will of necessity be silenced and dumb. The fruits of the earth will rot. The soil will turn barren, and the very air will sicken in sullen stagnation. After this manner will old age come upon the world. Religion will be no more. All things will be disordered and awry. All good will disappear. But when all this has befallen, Asclepius, then the Master and Father, God, the first before all, the maker of that God who first came into being, will look on that which has come to pass, and will stay the disorder by the counterworking of his will, which is the good. He will call back to the right path those who have gone astray. He will cleanse the world from evil, now washing it away with water floods, now burning it out with fiercest fire, or again expelling it by war and pestilence. And thus he will bring back his world to its former aspect, so that the cosmos will once more be deemed worthy of worship and wondering reverence. And God, the maker and restorer of the mighty fabric, will be adored by the men of that day with unceasing hymns of praise and blessing. Such is the new birth of the cosmos, It is a making again of all things good, a holy and awe-striking restoration of all nature, and it is wrought in the process of time by the eternal will of God. For God's will has no beginning, it is ever the same, and as it now is, even so it has ever been without beginning, for it is the very being of God to purpose good. When Hermes Trismegistus spoke these words to Asclepius, they must have seemed distant, abstract, perhaps even impossible. But look around you now. Don't you see the signs he described? The scorn for sacred things, the preference for darkness over light, the silence of divine voices, the disorder in nature itself. Yet remember, this prophecy doesn't end in darkness. It speaks of restoration, of renewal, of a new birth of the cosmos. And here's what's crucial to understand. We stand at exactly this turning point. This isn't just ancient wisdom, it's a blueprint for our moment in history. The question isn't whether these words were prophetic. They clearly were. The question is, which part of the prophecy will we choose to fulfill? Will we continue the descent, or will we be among those who, in Hermes' words, deem the cosmos worthy of worship and wondering reverence once again? The choice, as it has always been, rests with those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. The ancient messenger has delivered his warning. What we do with it, that's the real prophecy yet to be written.